The river had been dead for many years. Long ago, water used to run strong through the valley, but now only dry mud and cracked earth remained. People from nearby towns avoided the place. They said strange things happened there at night. Some said they heard sounds under the ground. Others said the air felt wrong, heavy, like something was watching. Most people stopped coming long ago. But Daniel was not afraid of old stories. He was a scavenger. He walked through forgotten places looking for metal, old machines, or anything he could sell. Life had never been easy for him, and fear did not pay bills. That evening, the sun was low, and the dry riverbed stretched wide and empty around him. The wind moved dust across the ground, making soft, whispering sounds. Daniel walked slowly, scanning the ground. His bag was almost empty, and he was thinking about leaving when he noticed something strange ahead. At first, it looked like a large rock sticking out of the mud, but the shape felt wrong. Too smooth, too curved. He stepped closer. Then he froze. It was not a rock. It was a hand. A massive hand, half buried in dry earth. Fingers larger than his entire body. The skin looked pale, covered in dried mud and faint glowing lines that slowly faded in and out. Daniel's heart began to race. He told himself it had to be a statue. Something old. Something abandoned. Then when the fingers moved, Daniel stumbled back, his breath caught in his throat. The ground made a low cracking sound as dust fell from the giant hand. For a moment, everything became silent. Even the wind stopped. The hand moved again. Someone was alive under the ground. Fear told him to run. Every story he had heard as a child came rushing back. Giants, monsters, disasters. Nothing this big could be safe. But when he looked again, he saw the hand trembling weakly, like someone struggling to survive. Daniel hesitated. Leaving felt safer, smarter, but something about the movement did not look dangerous. It looked desperate. He slowly walked closer again. "Hello," he said, his voice small in the empty valley. The ground shifted slightly. A deep, slow sound came from below, almost like breathing. Daniel swallowed hard. He grabbed a broken metal plate from his bag and started digging carefully around the fingers. The mud was dry but heavy. Each movement took effort. Minutes passed, then an hour. As more earth fell away, he saw part of an arm, then a shoulder. The glowing marks on the skin became clearer, forming strange patterns he could not understand. They pulsed faintly, like a weak heartbeat. Suddenly, the earth trembled. Daniel stopped digging. The vibration lasted only a few seconds, but it felt deep, like it came from far below. He looked around nervously. The valley was still empty. Then he heard it. A soft sound. A voice. He turned back toward the buried figure. Slowly, dirt slid away from a giant face. A woman's face. Her eyes opened slightly, glowing faintly in the fading light. She looked confused, frightened, and exhausted. She spoke again, but the words were not human. Daniel did not understand anything she said. Still, her expression was clear. She was not angry. She was scared. Daniel's hand shook. He realized how small he was compared to her. One wrong movement, and she could crush him without trying. But she did not move. She only looked at him, as if asking for help. Daniel took a deep breath and kept digging. The sky slowly turned dark as night came. The air became colder, and a strange feeling spread through the riverbed. The glowing marks on her arm grew brighter the more she woke up. Each time she moved, the ground answered with a low rumble. Daniel finally stepped back, exhausted. He had freed part of her upper body, but the rest remained trapped under layers of hardened earth. The giant woman looked at him again, her eyes clearer now. She tried to lift herself, but pain forced her to stop. The glowing marks flickered wildly. Then the ground shook again, stronger this time. Cracks spread across the dry riverbed, moving away from her body like spiderwebs. Daniel felt cold fear run through him. This was not normal. Something was reacting to her awakening. A deep sound echoed from beneath the earth. Not a voice, not an animal, something else. Daniel slowly realized a terrible thought. Maybe she was not buried to die. Maybe she was buried to keep something else asleep. And by helping her, he might have just woken up. The night grew colder after the ground stopped shaking. Daniel stood still, listening carefully. The dry riverbed was silent again, but the silence did not feel peaceful. It felt heavy, like the land itself was holding its breath. Dust slowly settled back into the cracks around them. The giant woman moved slightly, trying to lift her head. Pain crossed her face, and she let out a weak sound. The glowing lines on her skin faded and brightened again, like they were struggling to stay alive. Daniel could see now that she was badly hurt. Deep marks covered her arms, as if something had chained her long ago. He swallowed his fear and stepped closer. "It's okay," he said softly, even though he knew she could not understand him. Her eyes followed him carefully. There was no anger in them, only confusion and relief. She tried to speak again, slower this time, but the words were still strange and unfamiliar. Her voice sounded deep but weak, like someone who had not spoken for a very long time. Daniel looked around the empty valley. No one would come here to help. If he left now, she would probably die before morning. He sighed and picked up his metal plate again. He kept digging. Hours passed. The moon climbed higher, casting pale light across the broken riverbed. Little by little, more of her body became free. Each time the earth shifted, the ground answered with a low vibration. Daniel began to notice something strange. The tremors did not feel random. They felt like a response, like something deep below was moving. Finally, with one last push, a large section of hardened mud broke apart. The giant woman pulled her arm free and collapsed back onto the ground, breathing heavily. The earth trembled again, stronger than before. Small stones rolled into the cracks around them. Daniel stepped back quickly. The woman slowly turned her head toward him. She placed one massive hand over her chest and spoke a single word. "Lyra." Daniel understood. It was her name. He pointed at himself. "Daniel." She repeated it slowly, her voice rough. "Done, ill." For a brief moment, the fear disappeared. She gave a small, tired nod, as if thanking him. But the moment did not last long. A deep sound echoed from far below the ground. This time it was louder, longer. The sound vibrated through Daniel's feet and into his chest. Lyra's expression changed instantly. Fear filled her eyes. She looked toward the cracked earth, then back at Daniel, shaking her head weakly. "No, no." Even without understanding her language, Daniel understood her fear. Something was wrong. The glowing marks on Lyra's arms suddenly brightened, lighting the ground around her. The air grew colder, and a strange pressure filled the valley. Daniel's ears rang slightly, like before a storm. In the distance, animals began to howl and run away from the riverbed. Lyra tried to stand, but fell back down. She grabbed the ground, breathing fast. Her eyes searched the darkness, as if expecting something to rise from it. She spoke quickly now, panic in her voice, pointing toward the earth beneath them. Daniel shook his head. "I don't understand." But he did understand one thing. She was not afraid of him. She was afraid of something else. Another tremor shook the valley. Larger cracks spread across the dry mud, stretching far into the distance. Daniel almost lost his balance. The sound from below came again, deeper this time, like something waking after a long sleep. Lyra closed her eyes in pain. The glowing lines on her body flickered wildly. She forced herself to speak slowly, struggling to form human words. "Seal broken." Daniel's stomach tightened. "What seal?" he whispered. Lyra looked at him, her voice barely audible. "Should not wake." The wind suddenly stopped. The night became completely silent. Even the insects were gone. Far away, beyond the hills, faint lights appeared as power lines flickered and went dark in nearby towns. Daniel did not see it, but the world around the valley was already changing. He looked back at Lyra, realizing the truth too late. Helping her had not ended her suffering. It had started something worse. And deep beneath the dried riverbed, something ancient had begun to move again. Morning came slowly, but the light did not bring comfort. The dried riverbed looked different now. New cracks covered the ground, long and deep, stretching across the valley like scars. The air felt colder than it should have been, and the silence remained. No birds, no insects, nothing alive nearby. Daniel had not slept. He sat a short distance from Lyra, watching her carefully. She looked stronger than before, but fear still filled her face. The glowing lines on her skin were steady now, shining softly in the early light. Lyra slowly pushed herself into a sitting position. The movement caused small stones to slide down the broken earth. She winced but forced herself to stay upright. Her eyes searched the horizon again and again, as if expecting danger to appear at any moment. Daniel handed her a bottle of water. She looked confused at first, but copied his actions after watching him drink. She moved slowly, learning by observing him. It made her seem less like a giant and more like someone lost in a strange world. For a moment, everything felt calm. Then the ground trembled again. Not strong, but constant. A slow vibration that did not stop. Lyra closed her eyes, breathing deeply. When she opened them again, she tried to speak carefully, choosing simple human words. "Long ago," she said slowly. "Giants here." Daniel listened closely. She pointed toward the earth beneath them. "Va." Her voice shook as she continued. "Piece by piece," she explained. "Long before humans built cities, her kind came to this world. Some giants protected life. Others wanted power. The war between them nearly destroyed everything." Daniel felt a chill run through him. Lyra touched the glowing marks on her arm. "Guardians," she said, pointing to herself. Then her expression darkened. She pointed down again. "One worse." She struggled to find the words. Daniel could see the fear in her eyes growing stronger. "Not giant," she whispered. "Hunter." The word hung heavy in the air. Lyra explained that the creature below fed on energy, life, fear, movement. The more chaos above ground, the stronger it became. The Guardians could not kill it, so they sealed it deep under the riverbed. Lyra stayed behind to protect the seal. She buried herself willingly. Daniel's chest tightened as he understood. "You stayed here alone?" Lyra nodded slowly. "Sleep. Keep it sleeping." The tremor beneath their feet grew slightly stronger, proving her words true. Daniel looked at the cracked earth around them. Guilt filled his stomach. He had thought he was saving someone. Instead, he had broken the prison. Before he could speak again, a distant sound echoed through the valley. Engines. Daniel turned toward the hills. Several vehicles appeared in the distance, moving fast toward the riverbed. Black trucks. Military. Someone had noticed the earthquakes. Lyra's body tensed immediately. Fear replaced exhaustion. She tried to stand, but her strength was not fully back yet. "Hide," she said urgently. Daniel hesitated. "They can help." Lyra shook her head hard. "No help. Fear attack." He looked at her, unsure. But deep down, he knew she might be right. Humans feared what they did not understand. A giant appearing after earthquakes would look like a threat. The vehicle stopped at the edge of the riverbed. Soldiers stepped out, pointing equipment toward Lyra. Red lights flashed as scanners activated. Voices shouted orders Daniel could not fully hear. Lyra lowered herself slightly, trying to appear smaller, less dangerous. But her size alone made that impossible. The ground suddenly shook again, stronger than before. A deep sound rose from beneath them, louder than ever. The soldiers froze. Even the engines of the trucks shut down as electronics flickered and died. The earth split open several meters away, dust rising into the air. Lyra's face turned pale. "It knows," she whispered. Daniel felt his heart pound. "Knows what?" Her eyes locked onto his. "That I am gone." Another massive tremor followed, and this time the sound from below almost felt alive, slow, hungry, waking after centuries of silence. Daniel realized the danger was no longer coming. It was already here. The ground did not stop shaking this time. The tremors came again and again, each one stronger than the last. Dust rose into the air, turning the morning light gray. Soldiers shouted orders, trying to stay balanced as the cracked riverbed shifted beneath their feet. Daniel felt the vibration travel through his body. It was not just movement. It felt like pressure, like something pushing upward from deep below. Lyra's breathing became fast and uneven. She stared at the widening cracks in the earth, her fear now impossible to hide. "It waking," she said quietly. A loud cracking sound split the air. A long fracture opened across the riverbed, stretching toward the center where Lyra had been buried. The ground sank slightly, and a deep, hollow sound echoed upward. Some soldiers stepped back, lowering their weapons in confusion. Then all electronics suddenly died. The lights on the trucks went dark. Radios stopped working. Even the scanning devices shut down at once. The only sound left was the earth breaking apart. Daniel looked at Lyra. "What is it?" She shook her head slowly. "Old, very old. Not like us." Another tremor hit, throwing Daniel to one knee. From the open crack, a wave of cold air rushed out, carrying a strange smell, dry, ancient, wrong. The temperature dropped quickly, and frost began forming along the edges of the broken ground. The soldiers panicked. Some aimed their weapons at Lyra, believing she was causing everything. "No," Daniel shouted, stepping in front of her without thinking. "She's not the problem." But no one listened. Fear was already in control. Lyra grabbed the ground, forcing herself to stand despite the pain. She looked down into the dark crack, her face filled with dread. "It's searching," she whispered. The earth suddenly bulged upward before collapsing again. For a brief moment, something moved beneath the surface, not fully visible, only a massive shadow shifting under the soil. The ground rose and fell as if something enormous was breathing below them. A deep sound followed. Not a roar, not a voice, a pulse. Daniel felt it inside his chest, making his heart skip. The sound felt alive, aware. The soldiers began retreating toward their vehicles, but the engines would not start. Panic spread quickly. One of them fired a shot into the ground. The sound echoed uselessly into the crack. Lyra turned to Daniel urgently. "Must go. Now." He hesitated. "What about them?" Her expression hardened. "If stay, all die." Another violent tremor answered her words. The crack widened, swallowing chunks of dry earth. A massive shape moved again below, closer this time. The ground above it lifted slightly before falling back down. Daniel finally understood. Whatever was down, there was not fully awake yet, but it was trying to reach the surface. Lyra grabbed Daniel carefully, lifting him onto her shoulder. The movement shocked him, but he did not resist. She began moving away from the center of the riverbed, each step heavy but fast. Behind them, the ground exploded upward. Dust and rocks shot into the air as something pushed against the surface from below. Soldiers ran in different directions, shouting in fear. Daniel looked back and saw it for a second. A dark shape beneath the earth, far larger than Lyra. Smooth, unnatural, moving without sound. Wherever it passed, the ground collapsed inward. His stomach turned cold. "That thing wants you?" he asked. Lyra shook her head while running. "Not only me." She slowed slightly, her voice tense. "It feel you?" Daniel froze. "Me? What?" Lyra did not answer immediately. Her glowing marks began to shine brighter again, reacting to something unseen. "Humans different," she said finally. "It feed on energy. Your kind strong inside." Another pulse shook the valley, stronger than before. The shadow beneath the ground changed direction, moving toward them. Daniel realized the terrible truth. Helping Lyra had awakened the creature, but now it was not hunting the Guardian anymore. It was hunting him. Ahead of them, the edge of the valley came into view, but Lyra's steps were slowing. She was still weak, and the creature below was moving faster. The ground cracked again directly behind them, and for the first time, something began to rise from the darkness beneath the earth. The ground behind them exploded as something massive forced its way upward. Earth and stone flew into the air, and a deep sound rolled across the valley like thunder. Lyra stopped at the edge of the dried riverbed, turning slowly as dust filled the sky. Daniel slid down from her shoulder and stared in shock. The creature was not fully visible, but its presence filled the valley. The ground bent around it, sinking under its weight. A dark surface pushed through the broken earth, smooth and endless like living stone. No eyes, no face, only movement. Wherever it rose, the air itself seemed to weaken. Plants turned gray. Small rocks lifted and trembled before falling apart. Daniel felt pressure in his chest, like something pulling energy out of him. He dropped to one knee, struggling to breathe. Lyra stepped in front of him immediately, her glowing marks shining bright. She looked smaller compared to the thing rising behind them, but her stance did not change. Fear was still in her eyes, but now there was also acceptance. "It awake," she said quietly. "Seal gone." The creature moved again, slowly turning toward them. The ground cracked in long lines as it shifted. Daniel realized it was not rushing. It did not need to. It was certain nothing could stop it. Lyra looked back at Daniel. Her voice softened. "I finished this." Like before, Daniel understood what she meant. She was going to bury herself again, seal the creature with her own life. "No," he said, forcing himself to stand. "There has to be another way." Lyra shook her head. "My guardian. My duty." The creature released another deep pulse. Daniel felt his strength fading again. But this time he noticed something strange. The glowing marks on Lyra's body were reacting to him, becoming brighter when he stood close. He remembered her words. Humans are different. An idea formed in his mind. Humans were not the strongest species, but they survived by thinking differently, adapting, finding solutions when none existed. "Wait," Daniel said quickly. "It feeds on energy, right?" Lyra nodded. Daniel looked around the valley. The broken military vehicles, metal, fuel, equipment. He realized the creature was following the strongest energy source, living energy. What if we give it something else to follow? Lyra looked confused, but she listened. Daniel explained fast. If they could create a large energy reaction away from the crack, the creature might move toward it, long enough for Lyra to rebuild the seal without sacrificing herself. It was dangerous. It might fail, but it was a chance. Another pulse shook the ground. The creature began moving closer. Lyra hesitated only for a moment, then nodded. "Trust." Together, they moved quickly. Daniel guided her toward the abandoned vehicles. Using fuel and damaged batteries, they created a powerful energy burst. Sparks filled the air as systems overloaded. The moment the energy released, the creature reacted instantly. The massive shape turned away from them, drawn toward the new source. The ground trembled violently as it moved. "Now!" Daniel shouted. Lyra stepped forward, placing both hands on the broken earth. The glowing marks on her body burned brighter than ever before. Light spread across the cracks, sealing them slowly. The ground began to close again, pulling the creature downward. The shadow resisted, the earth shaking wildly, but the seal held. With one final pulse, the creature disappeared beneath the surface. Silence returned. Daniel collapsed onto the ground, exhausted. The valley was still again. The pressure in the air faded, and for the first time since night, the wind returned. Lyra fell to one knee beside him, weak but alive. "It done," she whispered. Days later, the riverbed was quiet once more. The cracks had closed, leaving only scars behind. The military declared the area unsafe and left it abandoned again. Lyra stood at the edge of the valley, ready to leave. She explained that she could not stay on Earth. As long as she remained, the creature might try to wake again. Before leaving, she looked at Daniel with gratitude. "Human small," she said softly, "but brave. You choose help even afraid." Daniel smiled weakly. Someone had to. A strange glow appeared briefly on his hands, the same pattern Lyra carried. It faded quickly, but both of them noticed. Lyra's expression changed slightly. "Maybe guardian now, not only me." She left soon after, disappearing beyond the horizon. Years later, small tremors returned to the valley. Nothing dangerous. Not yet. But sometimes, when the ground shook, Daniel felt the faint glow return in his hands. And deep below the earth, something ancient waited, watching, learning, and waiting for the next time humanity would stand in its way.